audience member by putting away your electronic devices so they don't distract anyone. We super appreciate that. I also want to give a shout out to our boosters who help us put on this event. Thank you so much to any boosters. If your family members at home are boosters, please let them know how much we appreciate them. Also, I want to give some appreciation to our tech crew up in the booth and the board. Thank you for running everything so smoothly. We literally couldn't do this without you. Y'all are the best. Speaking of people who are the best, we have an awesome presenter today for you we're so excited about. Our guest this hour is a professional author whose stories and essays have been published in places like the Best American Essays, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and so many more. She just recently finished a story about how she found a way to explore anger through the art of throwing axes. Pretty cool. If you like what you hear today, which of course you will, know that she has 3 published collections out there, and we have copies of her most recent work. It's called The Wrong Way to Save Your Life, and we have copies of that for sale today for $16. So I think you guys are going to really, really love our presenter. Please put your hands together for Megan Steelstrand.
I'm so happy to be here. This is like high school is when I figured out that I wanted to be a writer. I'm going to wager some of you are in that same boat. Also, my father was the principal, so I spent most of high school like trying to hide out in the lockers and halls and not be anywhere near him so he didn't catch all the things that I was doing, most of which were cutting class to hang out in the library, which is not the most exciting thing maybe in the universe, but it sure was for me. Maybe some of you are my people with that. At that time, I was really into reading sci-fi. I read a lot of Tolkien, like hiding on the floor from my father in the library in high schools. But eventually the librarian, and I don't know if how often you all hang out with the librarians here. They are my favorite people, so if any of you are in the room, thank you for your work. But anyway, the librarian handed me a book called Blackwood by Richard Wright. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's a memoir. In chapter 13, the character of Richard gets a library card for the first time. He's a black man in the Jim Crow South. And he gets this library card, he's sitting on the floor, and he's reading novels that were written by white writers. And I was 16 years old, sitting on the floor, reading this novel by him, and we were kind of having the same moment. And that was for me kind of the time that books sort of cracked open the world, and I thought that I wanted to do this for a living. I moved to Chicago to go to college to study creative writing. I went to graduate school to study how to teach creative writing. I paid for all of that writing tending bar. I poured drinks for 15 years to pay off all of my college loans, but it was there that I figured out that telling stories out loud is really connected to how we tell them on the page. So I started a theater company in Chicago where we tell stories out loud in order to get at the writing on the page. And all of the stories that we tell out loud were backed by rock bands, by DJs. I've written performances with 60-piece orchestras, kind of all depending on the venue. So that's where, for me, this work kind of started out. So I want to give you a reading of one of those so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. This one in particular, I wrote after working for several months with a whole lot of high school students at Interlochen. Their work was really brave. They were kind of kicking my ass, actually. And I really like that sort of competition, like the person sitting next to you is writing such good stuff that you have to go home and get some work done. So anyway, I wanted to write something for them, so I thought that's what I would share with all of you all first. This is called F. The summer between high school and college, I worked nights at an Arby's in a truck stop near Dexter, Michigan, a cute, idyllic white picket town, which to me was just a piss break on the way to Detroit. I mopped the floors of that piss break. I wiped the booths with Lysol after truckers ate their dinner. I stood behind the counter in my blue visor and took orders for beef and cheddar sandwiches, which I wasn't allowed to make because even though my birthday was in August, I was still a year too young to use the deli-style slicer that shaved roast beef. Question: why is 18 the acceptable age to operate potentially hazardous machinery? Is there a certain maturity I gained that summer between high school and college? Did I become more knowledgeable? Like snap your fingers and suddenly you're this totally together person who can be trusted with industrial-sized blades the same way that snap 10 years old and you can shoot a gun, snap 16 and you can drive, snap 21 and you know how many vodkas are too many vodkas. More than anything, I wanted something to happen. I was invincible on the edge of my life. Do you know that feeling? Standing on a 3 or 10 or 20-story rooftop, leaning forward, the whole world spread out before you, and you think, God, what if I jump? What if I fly? But I couldn't. I had 3 more months till I left for college and an 8-hour night shift. Arby's sauce, Jamocha shakes, curly fries poured into wire mesh baskets and lowered into the deep fryer, splattering boiling oil like knife tips on my skin that hurt like hell but still felt good because I was feeling something. Anything besides this incredible 17-year-old need. The summer between high school and college is supposed to be revelatory in some way, right? I pictured mine like a coming-of-age sort of rom-com dramedy involving the following. 1, cushy day job selling muffins at the farmer's market. 2, home to my cute, idyllic white picket family. And 3, nights making out with the boy I loved. Note the wordplay, boy I loved as opposed to boyfriend. I knew he was seeing other girls, but during that summer between high school and college, I equated love with danger, and Lord knows I needed some. Scholarship to a swanky school out east, goody-goody rep that was a total coping mechanism, all of which made my love for the boy I loved a total cliche. I spread quilts on my bedroom floor to silence footsteps, removed the window screen, and climbed 2 stories down a fairly precarious satellite antenna. The boy was waiting at the lake behind my house, and we rowed out across the glass-like water, stars reflecting above. It was lovely. Mid-Michigan, mid-May, our bodies tangled in the bottom of the boat. The sun had risen by the time I climbed back up the antenna, and as I struggled to replace the window screen, I heard footsteps outside my door. Megan? It was my dad, and I dove fully dressed under the covers and held my heartbeat. He'd heard me. He must have heard me. The room was just below mine. Get downstairs, he said through the door, and I was not invincible then. I was the opposite of invincible. I was screwed. We sat in the living room, a place reserved for the most serious conversations. I counted squares in the oriental rug and wished my parents would say something, anything, please anything besides, did you have sex in the rowboat? So when they told me they were getting a divorce, it's fair to say I asked for it. I remember they sat on opposite sides of the couch. I remember 40 squares in the rug. Did I cry? Did we talk about how love isn't rowing around under stars or 26 years of marriage? Did we talk about how no one is ever invincible? I don't remember. What I do remember is that neither of them moved out, and the tension in that house was so heavy I thought my bones would crack. I did everything I could to avoid it, making out with the boy I loved, staying with friends, wandering zombie-like through the aisles of a 24-hour Meijer, until finally deciding I might as well earn some money. And so, barbecue sandwiches, Philly beef and Swiss, curly fries dumped frozen into wire baskets, dipped into oil, wait till they cool, wait till the end of a shift, wait till I leave for college and jump off the ledge, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and after a while, standing over that deep fryer with its boiling wire, I started to imagine what would happen if I pressed the inside of my forearm against the basket, connecting my skin with the sizzling crosshatch. That would be something, certainly. 3 months is not a long time, but that summer, a glacier, a watched pot. I'd look at the clock above the food line, shocked that only a few minutes had passed since the last time I looked. To pass time, I counted onion rings and wished for something, please anything, to happen. So when the boy I loved came in to tell me about that other girl and how she was pregnant, it's fair to say I asked for it. I remember we sat across from each other in the shiny vinyl booths. I remember the smell, Arby's in my hair, Arby's under my fingernails, Arby's up my nose. Did I cry? Did I say awful things, trying to pick a fight, because if he was standing there yelling, at least he'd still be standing there? I don't remember. What I remember is chicken tenders, horsey sauce, curly fries dumped into boiling oil. It was August, 2 weeks left, and I could jump, new life, new people, new heartbreak, and for the 1000th time, I wondered what it would feel like to lay my forearm against that basket, to solder my wrist to the wire, to smell my flesh burn through to the bone, to be an active participant in my life instead of responding to what was happening to me, to do something. So I did. My arm and the wire were in contact only for a second, but that's all it took. I screamed and stuck my left arm into the ice bin, still holding the sizzling basket of fries in my other hand. My coworkers must have found me there. They must have brought me to the emergency burn station. They must have asked what happened because I remember saying it had been an accident. I'd been careless, I told them, even though hurting myself had taken all the care in the world. Later, at freshman orientation, I'd wear long sleeves to cover the bandage, and later still a 4-inch leather cuff to hide the scar, a purplish rectangle of chicken wire that would, over time, fade to a horizontal line bisected by 2 smaller lines, an F. F is for fear. F is for fly. F is for French fries. Later, I'd get a job as a food runner at a fancy Southwestern restaurant. Cheese sticks, stuffed mushrooms, jalapeno poppers in wire mesh baskets, boiling oil like knife tips on my skin. And later, after I'd left that college and another, left the country and another, I'd find myself in Chicago in a bar with a woman I didn't know how to love. When she reached to pay for my drink, her long sleeves pushed back, revealing faded scars that climbed from wrist to forearm. That night was the first time I ever talked about what I had done, how I don't know why I did it, and how now, 20 years later, I still can't explain that pull towards danger. There is no snap, 21, and now I get it. Snap, 31, and now I've healed. Snap, 39, and here I am, invincible. There's only me, here on the edge of my life. The whole world is spread out before me. God, what if? So, that's the kind of work we make the second story. I've been doing this work for 20 years. I travel all around the country, and I help people tell their own stories. It's awesome. It's not something that I ever thought would ever happen. It's not something that I knew you could do for a job. Like, I know that many of you are sitting there, you're thinking about college, you're thinking about what you want to study, you're thinking about what this path to being a writer looks like. And every single step that I have made on this path is not something that I ever thought would happen. Most specifically, I wrote a story in a kind of a similar kind to what I just read to y'all, about healing from postpartum depression by stalking my next door neighbor with a wireless baby video monitor. I wrote to tell to 200 drunk people in a bar. I didn't write it for the page. I wrote it to perform. I'm gonna wager I have some theater artists in the room, maybe. And there was a woman in the audience that night. Her name is Roxanne Gay. Maybe some of you have read her work. She asked if she could publish it. A couple months later, I got an email from another writer named Cheryl Strayed saying it had just been included in the Best American Essays. I got an agent. I got 2 new book deals. I got an email from a guy asking if he wanted to write for the New York Times. And I wrote back and said, "Who the hell are you and how did you get this number?" And he wrote back and it just had a link to his Wikipedia page, which is when I learned ever anybody emails you, you should Google them before you respond to them. Then I started writing for the New York Times. All of this happened because I wrote a story about my life and I told it aloud in a bar. And I say that because we don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know how the work is gonna travel. And I think we spend so much time thinking about how we have to craft it to matter for somebody else, and what does big publishing want, and what does big marketing want, when really it starts with the stories that matter, to you. The next thing that happened is my house burned to the ground. So I pitched my agent a book of essays about fear. You know, you feel fear in your body in a certain kind of way then. And so that's what the most recent book was about, and I'll read you just a little bit of the introduction. A lifetime or 2 ago, I lived with my friends Heather and Pete on Armitage Avenue, just west of Western. Our apartment was a unicorn so far as renting in Chicago. An enormous open loft, wallpapered with windows and cheap as hell. A hallway snaked back to 2 smaller rooms, one for me, one for Heather, and behind those, what realtors call a master bedroom, huge, with high ceilings and a skylight. This was Pete's room. He paid double. He had a 9-to-5 job in an art studio with a salary and health insurance, which to me seemed so grown up and impossible, especially for an artist, but he did it. He made art and he made a living, and if he could, I could. At 23 years old, I needed that belief like food and sex and shelter. When he let me, I'd sit on the floor in his room while he painted, reading aloud from the novels I was studying, and sometimes, if I felt brave, my own nervous starts at stories. I loved being there, part of it, the process, the mess, tubes and brushes and sketches and ashtrays overflowing so he'd ash in empty beer bottles or in mugs filled with days-old coffee or mugs filled with paint water or mugs filled with whiskey or wine. I don't think we owned glassware. I don't think we washed any dishes. It made more sense to avoid the stacked piles in the kitchen sink and instead grab a mug off Pete's floor and scrub out the moldy coffee cream in the bathtub. He didn't have any furniture, just a mattress on the floor, a cage for his iguana, and canvases. He painted bodies. He painted abstract. He painted me, circus poster style, biting the head off a live chicken after I read him the scene from the novel Geek Love where Aqua Boy preaches to the devoted. If they love you, it must mean you're all right, says Aqua Boy. You poor, poor baby. You just want to feel all right. Read that part again, Pete said, pointing at me with a paintbrush. He was all muscle and sinew, arms full-sleeved with black geometric tattoos. He had a long, pointy goatee a decade before hipsters and what's it called, beard art? He wore a belligerent uniform of black jeans and no shirt, never a shirt. He must have owned some, at least for work, or crappy Chicago winters. Band logo stuff, probably. Slayer, Black Sabbath, Behold the Living Corpse. I'm trying to see him, reaching down the line of my life. Memory is portraiture, a still shot instead of a moving picture. He smelled like cigarettes. He built me bookshelves. He'd make both fists into devil horns, yell, metal, and stick his tongue down past his chin. He pointed at me with a paintbrush. Poor baby, you just want to feel all right. For my birthday, he took me to the Art Institute. We were there for hours. He taught me to see. I hope that doesn't sound pretentious. It was actually a gift. We went painting by painting, color, context, scale. I'd be ready to move on, and he'd tell me to wait, look again, look closer. What do you see, he'd say. How was it made? When was it made? What was happening in the world when it was made? How did what was happening influence what was made? What are you gonna make? And when are you gonna start? Now, I'd say, today. The questions we ask about art are equally vital in examining the self. Memory and assumption, love and fear. I build on this vocabulary over 2 decades teaching writers and teaching teachers, but I first started thinking about it there with Pete in the Art Institute, standing in front of Egon Schiele. My favorite piece is Sky Above Clouds, a 24-foot oil painting by Georgia O'Keeffe. It hangs above the back gallery staircase, the ceiling diffused sunlight. It's breathtaking, blue and pink in a sea of white clouds like cobblestones. I imagine it like a road, a path. You can walk down the stairs or up into the sky. The truth? I was in love with him. How could I not be, there under the clouds? Nothing happened though. He was my roommate. He was my friend. He didn't like me like that. It would have gotten weird. I'd been hurt before. Everything ends badly. Breakups are awful. Divorce requires paperwork. Juliet dies in the end. The iguana smelled. I hated metal. What if he didn't feel the same and I had to stop imagining us together? The video on demand as I fell asleep at night. Uncertainty is better, wrote Chekhov. At least then there's hope. What if we did get together and I hurt him? I didn't want to hurt him. I loved him. So much so that I'd bug him about the cigarettes and he'd tell me to back off, and I'd quote statistics about lung-related death, and he'd say, well, we could all go at any time, wiped out by a bus, a train, an explosion like lightning, a heart attack on a mountain, a tumor in the brain, the skin, the breast, by your own hand when it's all too much, or an AR-15 in a school or park or street, so who gives a shit about a cigarette, or what's healthy or right or fair? There are so many reasons not to try. They all start with, I'm scared. So there are 17 essays in the book, and they're all about fear. I made a list of all the things that scared me. Some of that stuff was the internet. Some of it was being a parent. Some of it was, a big part of it was that my dad is a big game hunter now in Alaska, and he's had 5 heart attacks on mountains, but he still keeps going up mountains. So that was a big thing that I was trying to write about too. So I think it all started, for me, with just these questions that I was trying to figure out how to explore. So this book came out in 2017. I spent a year touring it. It was a pretty interesting time to be touring the country talking about fear. I was on Sanibel Island the week Hurricane Irma hit. I was in St. Louis the week that the police officer who killed Mike Brown was acquitted. I was in Las Vegas the week of the shooting. I was working with 300 middle school students the day after Parkland. And in all of these places and in all of these communities, it was the work and the art that let us get into the conversations. So I'm interested in how this kind of artwork can make conversations happen. I'm also really interested in how mad I am all the time right now. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, but me in our kind of current place and climate right now. But I was trying to figure out kind of how to deal with that, deal with my own anger at different things that were happening in the world. So that's when I started throwing axes. I joined an axe throwing league, and I threw axes twice a week for a year, and then I wrote about it. So it's a question that I've been asking right now in my own work, is what are the different things that we are all doing to get through the day, and then how do we get at storytelling through that? I'm wondering if people have questions at this point in the game. I'd love to be of service if I can be, and then I'll read you something else right at the end. Anybody have any questions? Why did I choose axe throwing? Because I wanted something really physical, and so like I said, my dad is a big game hunter and a fisherman in Alaska, and he doesn't understand why I don't just go out into the yard and throw axes. I live in Chicago. Like, do you all live in places where you can just like go step outside and throw stuff? Is that a thing that can, if I were to go out, like I would walk outside my apartment, and I don't know if we need like some white middle-aged lady running around the streets of Chicago throwing axes at people. So so has anybody been axe throwing, like at a league here? Have you been? It's almost exactly like a bowling alley. Like you get a lane, you give them $20, and then for an hour they give you an axe and you just throw stuff. And it felt really good to get it out of my body a little bit. I'm also like coming right to you. I'm betting that there are like athletes in the room and that kind of thing. Like, how do you get stuff out of your body by like running sprints, or like how do you keep it moving? So when I think about the stuff that I want to write, it's actually the questions that I'm trying to figure out in my own life. So the things that actually matter to you as a human being, like the things that you and your friends are fighting about, or the things that you see on social media and you can like feel your blood. You know in cartoons how the characters fill up red and then eventually it explodes out their brains? Like I'm trying to cut it off in the writing before my brain actually explodes. Yeah.
Okay, just a question. Exactly how heavy are these axes?
That's good. I appreciate the logistics of it. They're not. It's not heavy. Like this is not like a Paul Bunyan kind of an axe. It's a hatchet. It's like this big, and then you stand. So 15 feet is the full rotation of an axe. So you stand 15 feet away from the target. You can either I throw two-handed over my head, or you can throw one-handed. And it's interesting because since this essay published, I've been tagged in hundreds of Instagram and Twitter posts of people going axe throwing. Some guy on the internet who I don't know made me t-shirts and is now selling them with like a big axe on the front and then a quote on the back. And there's a women's league that started because of the essay, and they're called the Lizzie Bordens. And they're sending me t-shirts. I don't know these people, but that's another interesting thing. Like you put work out on the internet and it travels in ways that you would never, ever, ever imagine. Yeah. Can you say that again? Sure. So the axe essay is in a publication called The Believer. And this is like I know there are some of you taking notes, so here is my suggestion to you. When you think in terms of making work and places where you might want to publish, what are the places that you love to read? How are you following those places on social media? How can you give a read to what they publish? You know, a couple pieces a week maybe, and then you start to get the voice of that particular place in your head. I've been reading The Believer for years. I love it. As a reader, I love it, and I really wanted to see my work in there, right? Like I wanted to have a home there, right? Because if y'all think about the writing that you're doing, is public? Can I just see hands? Is publication something that y'all want to be going for? Some people are thinking about it, maybe, right? Okay. So the big question that I would ask of y'all is, what are you reading? And then when you make work, can you imagine it living in some of these places that you're reading? Yeah.
When you go exo, you're part about throwing the ass, throwing the ass, squashing the ass, squashing the air, washing it.
That is a fantastic question. I think when I first start, I am very competitive. So when I first started, I thought the satisfaction was going to be about hitting the center of the bullseye, right? Like in the same way that you want to bowl the strike or like sink the corner pocket when you're playing pool, right? It's in the success of it. But it ended up not being that at all. I think for me, like I was just really tense in my body a lot, so it was the physical release of it. And I tried to do yoga for a while. But then, they make you lay around in corpse, but it's called corpse pose, right? Do any of you study yoga? Do I have yoga people? Right? And you have to lay there at the end for like 10 minutes and you're alone in your thoughts. That was not good for me at all. So like I needed some kind of a release. But I think what my favorite thing now is the sound of it is the part that's the most satisfying. Yes. The biggest thing that I fear about the internet? Okay. Okay, so this book is called The Wrong Way to Save Your Life. Here's how I got the title. So I wrote about my house burning down for the New York Times. And then my editor, this was in 2015, so it was not this past mayoral election, but the mayoral election before that, all right? And so my editor at the Times asked if I wanted, I'm a Chicagoan, so he wanted to know what I thought, so what I read about the upcoming mayoral election. And I found that really terrifying, like because I'm a woman on the internet, and that's not always the safest place in the world, right? So I walked around being scared, and I'm gonna put this question out to those of you who write in other genres, right? Like it's so easy sometimes to be like, oh, well, I'm just a personal essayist, that's all I write. Or I'm just a playwright, or I'm just a poet. And the truth is, if your blood's boiling a little bit, and you have an understanding of how sentences work, you can make anything you want to make. You don't have to be boxed in by genre in some kind of a way, right? Like primarily I make essays and memoir. I'm working on a novel right now. I'm finishing a screenplay. I do episodic television work, right? But when I was first asked to write about politics for the New York Times, I was so scared. And I was like, I don't do that, and I told the editor that I wanted to think about it for a minute. And while I took 2 days to think about it, the essay about my building catching on fire went live. You all know how comments roll on the internet, right? Or Twitter, Instagram. Just immediately there were hundreds of comments, the majority of which were great and lovely. But there was one woman, she emailed my personal email through my website. She emailed me at Northwestern where I teach. She emailed me at the theater company where I work. She emailed me across all social media platforms, including Google+, which I hadn't checked in like 10 years and had forgotten that I made an account. And all she said, it was in all caps, and it just said, that was the wrong way to save your life. And she was talking about like how I picked up my baby and ran out of a burning building. But it was just kind of this kind of epiphany of like, God, people are going to come after us no matter what we say. So we may as well say some things that matter, right? What matters to you? That's the place where you want to start making work. So back to the question of what scares me the most about the internet. Now, much less than before, because now I publish there all the time. And I know how to like control my filters and that kind of thing. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I think that now I would be more afraid of not saying what it is that I want to say. Any other ones? I think there's a hand back there.
Do you think writing about your fears help you overcome them?
I think it helps me get through them. I don't know. I don't know if it's possible to overcome something. I think fear. I mean, I have some things now that matter. So it makes sense to me that I would be afraid. Like I would be afraid of things for my kid or for my own safety. So I don't think it helps me overcome it, but it does make it easier to walk through a little bit. Here?
Over on that side.
Over on this side? Okay. Yeah.
So I noticed that you refer to your work as your artwork.
Yeah.
And as a writer, I think you know the power of words themselves. So when you changed your vocabulary, maybe from calling it work or started calling it artwork, does that influence the way you look at your work, the way you wrote it?
That's a great question. I think like this in a nutshell is what an essay is, right? Like interrogating some of these questions, right? Like I think like all of us throw around words like family or parent or home or boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, like without really examining them or defining them. But art and work, like for me, I kind of use them interchangeably. I mean, I think writing is art, so it's important to me to name it as such. But also, like I noticed one time, do you all keep digital calendars? Like I keep a Google calendar, you know, and you can see those colored blocks, right? Like everything red, that's when I've got to do something for my kid, or everything, like me being here today is in green because it's part of my job, right? And I noticed at one point that I didn't have any color blocks for my writing. Like I somehow thought that my writing would be fit in between all of these other things that I did, and for me that's a problem. Like this is what I need to do in the world, so I need to focus that and to make sure I'm scheduling the time. So when I think about it in terms of work, it's more the process. I don't write like, oh, I'm now hit by inspiration in this one moment, so I'm going to sit down and do it. Like I sit down to do the work every single day. So it's a practice. So that for me, that's where the word work is coming from, which feels really important. Also for me, there's a difference between the practice of writing every day and the choice of sharing it. There's a lot of what I write that I don't share. Because I don't want my dad in Alaska or my ex in New York or my kid 10 years in the future to read it. It's just mine, right? Like even me telling you all the story of like burning myself when I was 18, that's a pretty personal thing. And long before I published that piece, I would perform it or I would tell it because it's just about us being in the moment right now. So again, my theater artists and writers and musicians, I think all of our work is really connected together in all sorts of really amazing ways. And especially if you all decide to make work in Chicago, because you're so close. Because when you start coming to the city in the work, you're going to see the literary community and the theater community working together in all sorts of really wild and amazing ways. Yeah. Did I have any more? Can't see. Okay. All right. Let me give you a quick. Here at the end. Sarah and I are drinking. We're at Little Bad Wolf, a cocktail bar in Chicago's North Side. It has fancy tacos and great old fashions, like really great. We've had a lot of them. A month earlier, her 2-year-old daughter Sophia was diagnosed with a brain tumor. She couldn't shake the flu, and when Sarah took her to the pediatrician, they discovered that the flu wasn't the flu. Snap your fingers. That's how fast your life can change. My friend Sarah is sunshine, weaponized optimism. You'll be all, I had a bad day, and she'll say, that's terrible, put down your things and let's have a quick dance. Sarah, you'll say, we're in a parking lot, or Sarah, it's raining, or Sarah, there's no music, and she will give you a look. You'll drop your stuff, You'll take off your shoes, you'll dance your face off to the sound of water hitting the pavement, and you know what? It's glorious. I hope you all have a person like that in your life, one who reminds you to choose joy. She's the first to say she's lucky. Her beautiful daughter, 2 older boys, her husband in the thick of it with her. They have insurance. They have some work flexibility. They have a village rallying around their family. Within a week of Sophia's diagnosis, our friends had set up a website to organize all the kindness, meals, pickups, playdates. It also lets Sarah send out updates so she doesn't have to talk about it every time she runs into somebody at the grocery store. What can I do, I asked when she dropped the boys at my house, the first morning of who knows how many rounds of chemo. Her face was locked in a sunny smile, brave for Sophia, for the boys. I thought she was a warrior. I thought, this is what strength looks like. Not a bodybuilder with the biceps, not Superman holding a skyscraper, not an army of thousands with the guns and the tanks and the bombs. No, strength is somebody's mom. At some point, she said through the smile, name it, I said. Not today, you say when. I will need to get very, very drunk. We met not long after I had my own kid. My friends were worried about me and thought I needed to talk to other mothers, so Amanda called Sarah. She had every reason to say no. She didn't know me. She had 2 small kids of her own to take care of, an insane schedule, and who wants to go outside in a Chicago winter? Hi, she said when I opened the door. Hi, I said, and burst into tears. I'd never been a crier. We're Dutch, said my father. But at that point, I couldn't stop. At the pediatrician's office, my son slept in his car seat while I filled out paperwork, including a long list of questions regarding the mother's health. Number 5, have you been crying excessively? Immediately, I started crying excessively, there in the lobby. The receptionist came over with a box of Kleenex, leaned into me and whispered, look at the woman behind you. I turned and there she was, car seat at her feet, crying her eyes out. You're totally normal, the receptionist said. You are all totally normal. My crying didn't faze Sarah. It's lovely to meet you, she said, outside the door, holding a bottle of wine. She wore a black wool cape and knee-high boots with long, thick hair to her waist. I stood just inside, holding my crying son, with snot everywhere and the same yoga pants I'd worn all week, my hair falling out in clumps. How's about we switch, she asked, reaching for the baby and handing me the wine. If you want to hide out for a night, Little Bed Wolf is your place. It's small and dark, low lights and wooden tables. Sarah and I sat in the corner, mainlined bourbon, and talked about things that weren't cancer. Then we talked about cancer. Cancer is here now. Sophia finally fell asleep, she said, telling me about the most recent round of chemo. They're in treatment at Lurie Hospital downtown. A blessing, Sarah's quick to mention. The best pediatric cancer facility in the Midwest, and it's here. They don't have to leave home like so many other families. I left her in the room with Scott and took the elevator downstairs. I needed something. Do you know that park across the street? We all build maps in our heads. I'd been to the ER at Lurie several times when ear infections made my son think his brain was exploding. He was delivered next door at Prentice Women's Hospital. Our first pediatrician's office is around the corner. I teach down the street at Northwestern Chicago campus. Activists shut down Michigan Avenue following the cover-up of Laquan McDonald's murder. The Magnificent Mile Lights Festival, named for a bank. Martin Creed's mothers at the Museum of Contemporary Art. I buy face cream at Marshall Fields, which I know was bought out by Macy's, but to Chicagoan, Marshall Fields is Marshall Fields, Comiskey Park is Comiskey Park, the Sears Tower is the Sears Tower, the Tribune is the Tribune. The park across the street from the museum, I said. She nodded. I sat there for a long time. People walked by on their way to work, shopping, playing with their kids, and I just lost it. Have you ever held a friend's hand as their heart breaks? This woman took care of me, peeled me off the floor. For her, I'd kill a dragon, except she doesn't want a dragon. I couldn't stop crying, she went on. All these people were staring at me and no one asked if you were okay. I tried not to scream. I'd had a lot to drink. My friend was hurting. Her child was hurting. Words can't fix it, but they are a start. Are and you and okay. I thought of all the times I hadn't said them. People I'd assumed were asleep, passed out, wanted to be left alone, don't draw attention, not your place. What if they were sick, needed help, needed shielding from a creepy guy or a loud racist or an online troll or some small act of humanity to make it through the next 5 minutes? I wanted to show up at that park and scream at everyone walking past my friend. I wanted to kick myself for all the times I could have helped but hadn't. I wanted to go to med school and find a cure. I wanted to raise $1 gazillion for research. I wanted to give Sophia a unicorn. I wanted to hug Sarah, but the table was at a weird angle. I wanted a better angle. I wanted a better world. I wanted to be a better person. But then, Sarah went on, after I was all cried out, I went back to the hospital and got in the elevator up to Sophia's floor, and a nurse got on with me. The door shut in front of us, and she looked at me, and you know what she said? She said, "Do you need a hug?" I watched the memory on her face. "I'm afraid," she said finally, and it was nice to feel something else, even for only a second. I think we're done? Oh, okay. Russ says I can do 2 questions, and then we're out. Hi, way up top.
How do you decide where you want to like speak, like at what schools or like venues?
How do I decide? Can you yell that last part?
How do you decide where you want to speak, like to audience and stuff?
Oh, like when I'm looking out at the audience?
No, like you're like rotating like what schools or like.
Oh, well, I go where I'm invited. I guess is the beginning of that conversation. Now I have a speaking agent. So he'll call me up and say, go to this place, do that. But that feels really new for me. For the longest time, I would go where I was invited, or in the same way that I was talking before about finding places that you want to publish. I would find places that I wanted my work to live, and then I would kind of stalk. I would stalk those places. And but mostly I want to be in places where people are talking to one another and where they're saying something interesting. And for me, that means a lot of high schools. I'm interested in the work that you all are making. When I read about what's happening in this country, or especially education in this country, all of the stuff that's being published right now is being written by people my age. And I think the work that we need to see what you all are seeing. I mean, especially if we're going to make our schools better, especially if we're going to make colleges better. I think that your point of view really matters right now, and it's not something that you have to wait to try to put out there until later. I think that what you have to say matters now. So I'd like to be in those places where I can be a part of those conversations. All right.
All right, there's like a minute or 2 before the bell rings. Thank you for being a great audience. If you want to come say hi to Megan, come say hi. If not, we will see you tomorrow. Or later today.